Welcome to episode 104 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. Welcome to the show. This week, Putin may be speeding the energy transition as the EU makes serious plans to reduce their dependence on Russian oil and gas. They're also trying to limit the export of Russian poisonous nerve agents to dissidents.
Rivian's CEO, RJ Scaringe, announced a massive price increase in their electric trucks and then immediately backtracked. It's a bad look for a CEO, but a flip-flop that could make him presidential material.
A Brooklyn marine terminal is set to become a major offshore wind hub. Welcome to the new era of small batch handmade artisanal wind turbines.
And one of the coldest cities in North America releases a study on why they should buy electric buses. Turns out EV buses are better at saving money, are more enjoyable to ride, and hold that new bus smell even longer.
All that and an uncomfortable discussion on slavery on this edition of The Clean Energy Show.
Since the invasion, oil prices have skyrocketed. Today, the average gas price in America hit an all-time record high of over $4 per gallon. Okay, that stings, but a clean conscience is worth $1 or $2. I'm willing to pay. It's important. Right. It's important. I'm willing to pay $4 a gallon. Hell, I'll pay $15 a gallon because I drive a Tesla.
I am terribly at ease with gas prices because I drive an EV. I look at them with wonder as I drive by the stations, but I don't really, it doesn't invoke a stressful reaction from me.
No, it's not bad at all. And I'll add, in British Columbia here in Canada, it's up to $2.09 a liter, which is around, that's, well over $8 a gallon. And that's where we're at here in Canada.
Yeah, and the U.S. complains. You complain in the United States that it's over $4 a gallon, but that's only I figured it out. It's like 3.7 liters per U.S. gallon, so it's about $1.20 or so a liter. I don't know, something like that. It seems that's our average normal gas price in Canada, and that's where we live. We live in a fairly good place, so it's usually worse on the West Coast, as it often is in the States. People are talking about it. My son is freaked out that I told him gas prices are headed to $2, and people are. It's a news discussion every day. But the solution is obvious, Brian. It's obvious.
It's obvious. Go electric. And I told someone today I'm planning a road trip to Toronto, and they were like, "Oh, that's sorry to hear that because of the gas prices." And then I informed them it's not an issue. And not only that, I have, almost 1,000 kilometers of free charging. So
thanks to one of our listeners who forwarded a referral to you. Bought a Tesla, and you had the referral code, which gave you some free kilometers.
But they do expire at some point, too. So glad to get them
So you've got
used.
A trip to Edmonton soon. Maybe you use them on that trip?
Yeah, I'll probably use some of them there. And but more importantly, the Tesla safety score has now come to Canada.
Oh, no.
And I'm here to reveal live on the air.
Oh, dear.
My Tesla safety score. The latest tweet from Elon said you're going to need a score of 98 and above in Canada to get this very first release. And my Tesla safety score right now is 98.
It's still disappointing.
It was the first couple of days I wasn't really paying attention, and so, I didn't do that.
I've been begging you for a year to pay attention. A year, Brian. An entire year when it comes to Canada. When you get your chance, you be ready with 100%. You drive safely, but no, Goggles Paisano Stockton. You had to drive like a madman.
Yeah, well, the safety score thing hadn't even shown up on the app yet, so I was sort of wondering, well, is this even active yet? And then I discovered it, and it was.
It was paying attention, unlike you.
Yeah, and so I've been steadily improving it since then. I've been getting 100 on the last 3 days, although I took a trip this morning and it wasn't quite 100. I
just hit a couple people. I don't understand what happened.
It's following distance is a big one. I've screwed that up a couple of times. You can't follow too close.
I knew it. You drive too fast. It's because of that $1,000 espresso machine. That's $1,000 a cup. It's not $1,000. It's more than $1,000. That's what it is. You're full of caffeine, man.
Yeah, but aggressive turning is the other one. Apparently, I've done that a couple of times.
I knew it. You know how I knew that? Because you had to replace the strut in one of your Hyundais before. fairly early on in its existence. And I bet that's Stockton. He takes his turns tight.
Yeah, that's probably it. And heartbreaking is the other one, but it's the unsafe following is the one that's getting me.
So you're a bastard tailgater. There's nothing worse than a tailgater. I'm glad you don't live in my end of town.
I don't know. I'm always annoyed when I see other people tailgating, so I've never felt like I was one of those people. But just to be extra safe, I'm going to have to back it off a bit.
98 is like a B-, I think. It's not great. Not in the Tesla safety score world. 100 is...
I thought 100 would be easy, but,
Brian, everybody else has 100 on all the user groups. 100. Everybody 100. You started at 97 when you first got your score, and you had to work it up from there.
Worked my way back up to 98, proud to say. But anyway, it's the release should be coming to Canada soon, maybe even by the next episode of the podcast, so we'll see.
If you have 2 fatal accidents a week, it's 96. That's what you're working with here. So
yeah.
I don't know what you're doing. Last week we were talking on the show, and I about your past and the Stockton family and the Stockton signer of the Constitution, which was news to me. And but you were making me think about things.
They are thinking about canceling him and changing the name of the college.
What did he do, Brian? What did he do?
Well, there was a lot of bad things went down long ago, but the one thing I read...
Answer? He owned slaves. The Stockton that you were hiding owned slaves. It's the first thing I Googled. The first thing. Stockton slave owner. And the second thing I Googled was Whittingham slave owner. And I didn't go well.
Uh-oh.
Did not go well at all.
This is taking a terrible turn here.
Many years ago, I had a podcast in the early days of podcasting, and it was also when Skype came out, and Skype would let you accept calls from strangers. So I was just by myself, and I needed to converse with somebody, so I accepted a call from strangers. But then I looked for nobody would call me until I changed my name to a woman. But that's another story. I searched for Whittinghams and then cold called them. And the first person I got was in Jamaica. And it's like Whittingham is like the most white English name in existence. Plus, there's not very many of us, like the Stocktons. There's not a whole lot of us.
Not a huge number.
We're not the Smiths or anything. Yeah. I talked to a woman in Jamaica, and she was like, there's a Caucasian Whittingham. And I was like, there's a Jamaican Whittingham. And she speaks like a Jamaican with an accent and lives there, for a matter of fact. And, and then it occurred to me, I think she pointed it out at the obvious, well, your relative was probably a slave owner. And, yes, he was. Or I don't know, my namesake was. I don't know how related I am. I think you're more related to this guy because you can prove it. But on my side, he just shares my name. He could have, who knows. But now he owned 85 slaves on a farm, and then there was a Jamaican slave rebellion, and I was looking at a document that it was written in the parlance of the time, which is really horrible to read because you see how they were referred to, how African Jamaicans were referred to and how they were treated, and 400 of them went off to live into the forest wildlife, and which was really rugged, and the owners couldn't find them, and so they lived free there.
So this is just, you Googled Whittingham slave owner, and this is the person that came up.
Yeah, and it came up in Jamaica. Don't Google, if you're Anglo-Saxon, don't Google your name plus the term slave owner. Maybe you should. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I have some reconciling to do with my history or possible history. I just thought that was interesting. Listen, I also have a Gorgoro update, Brian, just today, hot off the press, that we were talking about them last week. That's the Taipei, Taiwan-based company that has those batteries that are swappable in scooters, 1 or 2 of them, and you go to like a vending machine literally in front of a 7-Eleven and just swap it in and swap it out without...
Yeah, and they've made 1 million of these batteries so far. It's amazing.
It's a big deal, and it's working very well. And they've come up with a prototype of a solid-state battery in the same format. So it looks the same, weighs the same, operates the same, is interchangeable with our current batteries, and the solid state. Remember, solid state has really not been commercialized, and neither has this yet. So we'll have to wait and see if it does get commercialized. But the big headline is that it is a whopping 40% improvement of the range/energy density. So that is quite, and it could be financially, iffy, like per kilowatt. It may not, but that's a big improvement. I mean, that's coming. If it's not financially viable now or commercialized now, it will be at some point, hopefully before this decade ends.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. I always have mixed feelings about reporting on those kind of prototypes, though, because you just never know how long it's going to take to actually get into production. But I don't know, Gorgoro seems to know what they're doing.
I also on Twitter today looked up because of gas prices, the savings of the average car sold in Canada and the United States, which is about 8 to 9 liters per 100 kilometers of fuel economy, meaning that the average is around a small SUV. And it's about $13,000 American savings to buy an electric car over a 5-year period. So if gas prices hit $2 in Canada or $5 in the States per gallon, it just, the economics change. It becomes even more interesting.
Yeah, so if you're pricing out, thinking of buying a gasoline car, just add $13,000 to that price, I guess.
Yeah. And that's usually what, you can usually find the equivalent car at worst for that much more. So, and I think you would really enjoy the experience of an electric car more, especially the day-to-day. You may not enjoy the highway trips as much, but you'll enjoy, even an early adopter will enjoy just charging at home.
Yeah, well, and that plays into the next clip that we want to share. So we've been talking the last couple of weeks about the charging infrastructure. And, in a lot of places, you are an early adopter, unfortunately. And where we live, really all of Canada is kind of early adopter territory, but different places, worse than others. Anyway, there's a YouTube channel called The Straight Pipes. It's kind of my favorite car review YouTube channel. I've been following them for a long time. I subscribed to them when they had less than 1,000 subscribers.
Oh, and you're an early man.
Early man. They're up to 1.5 million subscribers. Anyway, they do car reviews based out of Southern Ontario here in Canada. And they mostly review gas cars, but they like electric cars, and they review them every chance they get. And so there's a great review out now of the Hyundai Ioniq 5, which they liked quite a lot. But and they're also doing the Mercedes EQS. That review is coming out soon. Mm-hmm. But, they had a long rant about the charging infrastructure. And this is in Southern Ontario, where I thought would be one of the more advanced places in Canada for charging infrastructure. But no such luck. So, let's play the clip.
Now there's a huge snowbank, which makes it difficult to get in, and the 351 wasn't working. So we called them, and they gave us free charging on the other ones because payment was unavailable on the other ones. You couldn't pay, and then the one next to it was broken.
Yeah, so 3 of the 4 chargers were broken in some way.
And then to add to that, some people were like, you should try the Petro one. There's a Petro one that's really good in the area. We went to that one, and
both of them were also broken there, so...
Surprise, surprise. But then after, you went to the flow charger that usually gets iced by ice cars.
Yep.
And you started charging up, but you don't have...
No, I didn't. I had to call you.
Because you don't have a flow account, and they don't accept tap by credit card, which I think is criminal, because if you had to have a special app to get, gas at a gas station, that would be straight up bonkers.
Yeah, so I had to call Yuri. Yuri enabled charging for me because he actually had to preload money onto his account because he had an account.
Yeah.
Enabled it while he wasn't even there, and then I actually plugged in and was able to charge.
That charger has been the same charger since 2017.
Yes.
And there are no more chargers there.
No, and it's still a 50 kilowatt charger.
That was 5 years ago.
Yes.
I literally hate the charging infrastructure in Canada for non-Teslas.
It's the worst.
Houston, we have a problem, don't we, Brian?
Yeah, and it's, I kind of understand because, there still is not huge demand, but, I just don't get why they're not on top of it. I mean, this is clearly the future.
I think it's very concerning, actually. Because you just missed it to Saskatchewan, where we live, sort of on the Canadian prairies, the last bastion of EVs in the world, a cold, sparse, barely populated place. But Southern Ontario is as populated as it gets in North America, and this is what they're dealing with. And this is after a couple of years of federal government incentivized fast charging programs, right?
Yeah, and the Tesla chargers have been here for 2 years. And so everyone's had lots of time to get their act together. The Straight Pipes were referring to 5 years ago when they did a sort of an electric car drive from Toronto to Ottawa.
Right.
And so they got a sense way back then of what it was like. And basically they're saying it hasn't really improved in the last 5 years. They had them before everyone else did, but haven't done anything since.
There is a problem here that needs to be addressed by regulation. Are you at that point where thinking that maybe the government has to step in and say, hey, these chargers have to be operational. You can't neglect them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Tesla doesn't seem to need the encouragement. Like, this is part of their business plan and part of their strategy. So they just, plan to have them working. But Petro-Canada, which is, a gas station that also has some chargers, they may need some extra incentive because they apparently only care about gasoline.
I saw a government ad on CNN for Canadian government advertising, sort of lobbying them to say, hey, don't just buy EVs from the States. So I'll play you a little clip that I recorded off my speakers here.
Because this is the only country in the Western Hemisphere that can produce batteries and electric vehicles from start to finish. Join the companies and investors in Canada, advancing sustainable transportation.
What do you think? That's kind of weird on CNN.
So that's a Government of Canada
ad?
ad?
Saying, hey, we're going to be we're the best place for EVs. Don't lock us out of, this is one of those things. A lot of lobbyists will advertise on CNN, and the Government of Canada is no exception. They're saying we've got minerals, we've got manufacturing in proximity, auto parts manufacturers. Don't lock us out with Buy American.
Yeah, and of course, Buy American can be a great election strategy if you're trying to get reelected in the U.S. But yeah, it often ignores things like the North American Free Trade Agreement, which says that we should have free trade all over North America. And yeah, a lot of the things like the EV tax credit they were proposing was all Buy American and probably in contravention of this, North American Free Trade Act. So yeah, they need to be reminded sometimes, I think, the American politicians. And I guess the government strategy is to remind them by advertising on CNN.
So my son has been texting me from university classes. He's taking engineering. Civil engineering, but he's in first year, so he's taking a little bit of everything. And I'm amazed at how many times he texts me and says, hey, I'm talking about Tesla batteries today, or I'm talking about wind turbines. And I'm really glad that, I thought maybe the faculty would be entrenched in the past, because the faculty does that. Not you, of course, but, it happens.
Present company accepted, but go on.
No, you're very up to date. You have a podcast, for God's sake. How modern can you get?
My students don't even know what a podcast
they
is.
Don't. So, it's just, I guess one of his profs predicted that lithium batteries would take over fuel cells back in 2007. He's very proud of that. I predicted it about 2008. How about you?
Let's say yes, but, we didn't have a podcast back then, so there's no proof.
All right. Canada has a carbon tax that applies to different things, including gasoline at the pump, which is built into the price, and it is currently 8.8 cents until April when it's going up again, $20 more a ton, so it'll go to 11 cents per liter, which seems like bad timing.
Bad timing, yeah.
But in 2030, it's expected to make $2. It's expected to make gasoline $2. So it's going up a little bit every year, and they figure by 2030 gasoline will be $2 a liter, and people are like, that's horrible. Why would you do that? Well, we're almost there now. We're going to be there shortly.
Yeah, in BC, we're there now.
So the question is, Brian, if we get there, two things. One, does it make sense if they took off the carbon tax for a while to ease the prices? Because there could be an argument made for that doesn't affect, if it's 2030 carbon tax prices, then that should influence consumers, right? Is it going to influence consumers? We'll see.
Yeah, and, there's a certain logistics to this. I mean, if gas suddenly went up to, $10 a liter, yeah, like I would expect the government to step in. It's just a question of, when is it proper to step in, because the whole point of the carbon tax, of course, is to make it more expensive so people won't use it as much. But, you always got to play the political games and sort of do what's, good for the people.
So in April, or maybe a bit later than April, we could see what the carbon tax currently would max out at as it keeps going up. Do you think that people will change their habits? I mean, there's been a little bit of chatter talking about EVs, and God knows my Prius is probably more expensive every day.
Yeah.
If I could just get my hands on a Bolt when they start manufacturing them in April, and they won't get one to May at the earliest. If I can sell that baby to somebody who wants it, then I'm going to be sad.
Well, just imagine if there was a Ford dealership parking lot that was full of F-150 electric pickup trucks tomorrow. I mean, they'd be sold instantly. The appetite is there. People are ready. There just isn't the supply there.
Yeah. There is a definite. What electric vehicle could you go out and buy today? I'm trying to think. Like some of the luxury brands, the Jaguars, the Mercedes, those are, and Porsche, but even Tesla's 6 months to a year, depending on what you want to order.
If you get the more expensive Teslas, they should come quicker than that. But everything is, everything that everyone wants is pretty much back ordered.
All right, Brian, we have a fairly negative show this week. Why? Well, we went into the show with the understanding that the European Union was going to change its reliance on Russian oil, Russian gas, like natural gas to be specific, and they would do drastic things fast that would involve clean energy, which they should have been doing more urgently. Well, they're doing pretty well, but they should be doing more. It just proves that if they really took an emergency happens, that's when people get moving. Well, the climate is an emergency, but the Russian oil thing seems to be more of an urgent cause. However, there's a huge push against that, and that is the fact that nickel prices are skyrocketing today.
Recently, it's gone up from $20,000 a ton to $100,000 a ton. Why is that? Because Russia, of course, is one of the major exporters of nickel, and all 6 of the biggest freight shipping lines in the world, including one that's Chinese, have stopped exporting from Russia and Ukraine, either because they're sanctioning Russia or Ukraine, or because of safety concerns, given that many of those ports are mired in conflict. Crucially, the fastest growing market for nickel is in the batteries of electric cars. So electric cars just got a lot more expensive.
Yeah, and they're not getting expensive today, but the supply chain will catch up pretty fast. That is bad news. That is, they went 60% today, Brian, just today. This is the price of a Chinese-made lithium battery. This is something I read from a credible source on Twitter who's in the clean energy game. Will increase from $124 to $228, basically double, if you have to buy nickel at $100,000 a ton, which is what the market high reached on Monday, and then it's gone up 60% the day after. So not what we're looking for, Brian Stockton, not what we're looking for.
Yeah, hopefully this is not a long-term problem, but I guess we'll see.
Now, it takes time. Canada is thinking about opening nickel mines. There's already a backlog of nickel because of EV batteries and stainless steel and everything else that goes into. But it's not easy to open a mine. It takes a long time, and we'll have to see how this goes. I'm just a little bit worried that everything you and I talk about on this show, the timeline, the progress is going to get derailed by this damn Russian conflict. It's not going to get helped. It'd be helped a little bit in some ways and hurt in others, but I certainly want the EV transition to go fast.
No, and of course, it trying to look at the conflict in Ukraine as a positive. This is hopefully accelerating the transition to clean energy. But of course, the other thing that could happen is more drilling for oil and gas to fill in the supply that nobody wants to buy from Russia. It's a real mixed bag. There was another story about everyone in the EU has been told, hey, turn your thermostats down by 1 degree Celsius, and then we'll need less oil from Russia or less than natural gas. And it's nice that people have something concrete that they can do like that, and I assume lots of people are.
Okay. Are you?
Well, I don't get my natural gas from Russia.
Oh, I'm surprised. I thought maybe slaves made it in Russia because of the Stockton heritage.
I do have that problem, yes.
It's just that you said, bad things happened a long time ago, and that just made me more curious. But,
Yeah, I mean,
shouldn't have said that.
It's a clean energy podcast.
Sure it is.
So
but the people want to know who are their hosts, what are their credentials, and how ethical are they? What blood do they have on their hands? Yeah. And you're driving around. You're going to have lots of blood in your hands if your score doesn't go up soon. All right. The European Union has planned to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. Just come out now with their plan. Reuters says the European Union is ready to kick its Russian gas habits even more. The European Commission has plans to replace 70% of Russian gas imports this year by ramping up liquefied natural gas purchases, green energy, and gas storage. Now, they're pretty vague on the green energy, and that's the part we're interested in here, but energy freedom will likely come at a cost. So we'll see. But the Commission assumes that 14 BCM saving of gas, largely by EU citizens turning down their thermostats by 1 degree Celsius. Good luck. Do you really think everybody's going to do that, though? Put on a sweater?
I think enough people will do it. It would actually make a difference.
Okay. I guess if you raise the price, people start putting down their thermostats. I'd probably do that myself. But, I'm finding as I get older, I'm turning it up more.
Yeah, me too.
Really? God, that's bad. My mother maxed out at 80 Fahrenheit. It was unbearable to go over there. Unbearable. Because when she cooked dinner in her later years in her 70s, Christmas dinner, and the whole place was steamed up from cooking potatoes and vegetables, it was 90 and humid. And everyone started wearing shorts. And she made fun of us and was mad. She didn't understand. What's wrong with us? Do we have high blood pressure? Some sort of disease? But it couldn't be heard. So yes, it was 90 degrees. And I'm fear that I'm getting that way. And I don't want to be that, Brian. I don't. I mean, give me cocaine or something to give me some energy to keep me warm. I just don't want to be that person who has their thermostat at 90 Fahrenheit. So if it's 14 points by turning down your thermostat by 1 degree, then it's 20 points by adding a whole bunch of accelerated wind and solar projects, which is basically 3 times what they were planning already. So they are going to speed up that, which will bring down prices, which will accelerate the energy transition. But batteries are really, really important, not just for EVs, but for energy storage, because we need to store that energy or we're dependent on gas. And I heard that they're talking about firing up coal plants. We were saying, well, maybe they should, unretire their nuclear. Well, that's not easily done, or even possible, or even on the table, I don't think, especially in Germany. So, but firing up coal plants somehow is. So great. Yay for that. I'd much rather see nuclear fired up than coal, obviously. So apparently it's easy to fire up a coal plant that's been retired. Great.
Oh, definitely.
So the new geopolitical and energy market reality requires us to drastically accelerate the clean energy transition and increase Europe's energy independence from unreliable suppliers and volatile fossil fuels.
Yeah, and the EU has a real problem because they import 90% of their gas consumption, and Russia provides about 45% of that. So, the EU needs to figure out their energy quick.
And even if the war ended now, would you want to depend on Russia? Would you even want to give them any of your money, for that matter? I guess Obviously, they've invaded Crimea 8 years ago, and people forgave them. Investors forgave them. When it comes to making a buck, the people will do anything. So with the measures in the Repower EU plan, which is what we're talking about here, we could gradually remove at least 155 BCM of fossil fuel gas, which is the equivalent in what they're taking in from Russia in 2021. So nearly 2/3 of that reduction can be achieved within 1 year, which is very surprising.
And one of the things that's been interesting to me about this is all of the companies, the corporations that are now shutting down their business in Russia. And this includes Apple. So Apple Pay no longer works in Russia. And Netflix just announced they've shut down their service in Russia. So I'm very, very curious to see, because of course we have a much more global internet economy than we had even 10 or 20 years ago. And it'll be interesting to see if these things can actually have an effect.
So phasing out our dependence on fossil fuels from Russia can be done well before 2030. To do so, the EU Commission says they will increase the resilience of EU-wide energy system based on 2 pillars: diversifying gas supplies. That's liquefied natural gas imports from people like the United States, but they also want to insulate buildings and make things more energy efficient. That you could be doing yesterday, man. Come on. And but they're taking their sweet ass time. The faster you do it, the more money you save, and the better it is for your citizens. So no mention of ramping up nuclear, and coal seems to be on the table.
Yeah, well, let's hope that this conflict does not last, and they can shut those coal plants back down again.
So this is from Vox News. 4 myths that the Republicans and others have been spreading about oil and gas prices, because there is a lot of BS going around about why oil and gas prices are high, and everyone in the fossil fuel industry is, we have politicians here saying some pretty ridiculous things up north and in the States as well. So number one is the Biden administration killed oil production. And but that's not true. The Biden administration has outpaced Trump in issuing drilling permits on public lands and water in its first year, according to data analyzed by the Center for Biological Diversity. And Biden's administration set a record for the largest offshore lease sale. However, as we talked about on the show, that's been blocked by a court, but not the government's fault. So you can't really blame them for not exploring gas. And of course, Canada, the oil premiers here want the Keystone XL to fire up, but that would take years.
Yeah.
I mean, Russia will be hopefully, God willing, a distant memory by then, and we'll probably be best friends with Russia, for all I know. Hopefully not, but...
And so the next myth is that oil and gas industry can quickly ramp up production to make a dent in prices, but they've made it clear in their earnings reports that they really don't plan to produce much more. The industry just 2 years ago was in complete free fall at the beginning of the pandemic. And, they perhaps learned their lesson and they don't want to produce too much. And of course, if they produce less, well, the prices stay high. So,
yeah. Well, myth number 3 is LNG exports, liquid natural gas, will fix Europe's problems and help lower gas prices. But that's not true, because the facility first needs to convert it to liquefied natural gas, which cools and pressurizes the methane so it can be shipped across continents. And on the other end of the ocean, you have to have another facility to turn it back into gas for shipment as a gasification, which is what I called it last week, and then you ship it via pipeline. So that's a lot of infrastructure to build, expensive and time-consuming, and not easy to just, carve off 50 cents off this summer's gas prices by shipping natural gas, even if you could, actually. So it's impossible to scale that up with enough time to make an impact on current prices, obviously.
And the 4th myth is that we can ignore climate concerns because boosting gas will counter dependence on Russia, but that's not true. The world's got to make some choices about what type of energy to support in the future. And this is a chance for us to break this cycle of dependence on not just Russian gas, but all gas.
Now, last week I was very optimistic about this. But then I turned on the TV And there's Joe Manchin, Mr. Coal Up His Ass from the fossil fuel industry. He supported this historic funding for climate change investments before, but then he blocked the passage of the Build Back Better bill, as we all know, which was a not happy thing for people like you and me and the future of the planet. But he's then rallied for an all-of-the-above energy approach, which includes a boost to fossil fuels. So listen to this clip, Brian. Yeah, maybe it's easier, it'd be better if you saw him, but you can hear in his voice just how happy this SOB is that he came to an agreement with fellow senators to block Russia gas so that his buddies can make money in the fossil fuel industry in North America.
So what we're doing today is we introduced a bill. It's been dropped. We have, I think there's 18 of us, 9 Ds and 9 Rs, that are on this piece of legislation that basically bans the Russian Energy Imports Act. That's all it is. We're banning Russian Imports Act. What we're banning is basically petroleum products, crude oil, LNG, coal. Mostly all fossils coming in the United States.
Yeah, so it's like a little kid who found a big wad of cash. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, well, if you're on our side of this debate, it seems obvious that this is a massive opportunity for clean energy. But if you're on the other side of this and you love fossil fuels, a lot of people, they love fossil fuels. They love the smell of gasoline in the morning. And if you're on that side of the debate, then, well, this is an opportunity to make more oil and gas. Okay, so in EV news this week, I read this report from Electrek, and it's about Rivian, electric truck maker Rivian. This past week has been a very eventful week for Rivian. They had an announcement a few days ago that they were increasing the price for their reservation holders $12,000 extra on the vehicles that they ordered, some as many as several years ago. Or they could keep with the current price, but, they were going to get a smaller battery and a less featured car. So this created a huge backlash. There was something around 70,000 pre-orders, and a lot of people were very upset about this. This was like a 25% price hike for some of these vehicles. So everyone was very mad at Rivian. A lot of people canceling reservations. So the next day or 2 days later, Rivian reversed course and said, okay, yeah, that was bad. We're not going to do that. So if you are one of those 70,000 people with an existing pre-order, they are going to honor that price. And this is going to be a costly change for Rivian. This is going to cost them somewhere around $840 million. If they were allowed this price increase, they would have gained an extra $840 million. So that money's out the window. But probably the right thing to do. A lot of these people,
you promised them a price.
Reserved years ago.
They promised them a price.
A lot of them are probably also.
Look how long ago my Cybertruck order was. Am I going to get screwed? Well, I don't have the money for that. But let's say I did. Do you think you might get one?
Hey, it's possible. Yeah, I might get one.
Would that be cool?
That would be super cool.
Do you think the Clean Energy Show sticker would stick to it on the side? We'd write it off?
Yeah. We'll get a wrap. We'll get a Clean Energy Show wrap for the whole thing.
Sure. With my giant face on the back end. It's not the first time you've heard that expression.
So anyway, any new orders to Rivian, those are going to be at the new prices. And good luck to them. The stock price was down quite a lot after this kerfuffle and has not really recovered yet.
It's a really bad look. It says they don't have their stuff in order, that they didn't know what they were doing. They couldn't estimate the prices right. And I've been losing faith in Rivian. Step by step. Or how about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it seems like everybody is figuring out that these prices are higher than they thought they were going to be. I think this applies to almost every EV maker. And of course, we're in an inflationary period, right? So we were just talking about the price of nickel, so that's not going to help the cost of electric vehicles in the near term. So, and vehicles in general, gasoline vehicles are up in price as well.
Okay, so there's a city that is our sister city up here in the prairies of Canada that we've argued that is very cold, that it's colder here than it is in Alaska, and much of Alaska, much of populated Alaska, because Alaska shares, an ocean front. a lot of places are influenced by the ocean, and we are not. And we're in this very, very, very cold place. So it's interesting that the city of Saskatoon, that's where my kid is going to university, about 2.5 hours away from us. You had a very harrowing experience going there in very cold and windy weather with your Model 3 standard range. Barely made it back, was 0 on the dashboard. So they did this, I guess the City Hall did a report on electric buses because they leased one for a year and tried it out in the cold weather. Worked fine. They liked it. And the problem is, at least the buses that they're buying are twice as expensive as diesel buses. They're $1.2 million compared to just $660,000, which is the price for, I guess, the diesel buses that they normally would buy to replace their fleet. They're always buying buses to replace their fleet. The buses generally last 18 years of cycle life. They generally do about 50,000 kilometers a year. It's about, 35,000 miles or something like that. So the annual maintenance costs of a diesel bus is $43,000, but just $9,000 for an electric bus. That is huge. Now, you knew that electric buses, EVs, have less maintenance, but in the bus world, it's really significant. It's almost 5 times as much, and they spend a lot of money on it, tens of thousands of dollars. The fuel costs, of course, are less. They would expect to spend $29,000 for a diesel bus and only $7,000 to power an electric bus per year. So with these operational savings, the battery electric bus becomes more financially attractive over time. And at the 10-year point of an electric, or an 18-year cycle of a bus, where the chassis and everything needs to be replaced, you start to see savings, a big savings compared to the equivalent. But you got to put twice the money up for you. You could buy 2 buses, and we say, no, they're going to buy 1. Well, that's what they're doing. Instead of buying 4 buses this year, they're going to buy 2 electric buses. But, man, I'm envious of that because I just would love to hear it or not hear it go by. Because I have buses go around my neighborhood. Do you? I mean, when I go for a walk, I have to listen and smell the freaking bus.
Not so much, but there's always school buses idling not too far away. It's super unpleasant.
So in addition, adding a diesel-powered coolant heater, which is an option, would slightly increase the cost of a bus, only slightly, but it would actually double the range, though. But you don't want to see that. You want to, right now, maybe that's an idea because our grid is not very clean here, 40% coal and all. So even with the significantly higher upfront capital cost for the battery electric bus, the analysis shows that approximately 470,000 Canadian dollars can be saved over the total life of the bus. That's 24%, Brian Stockton. And with that number applied to a fleet of 140 buses that they have, it's $66 million, which is a lot for a small city. A lot of savings for a small city. You could build half a football stadium with that. You could build swimming pools and all kinds of wonderful things for your people. And that's by buying electric buses. And it's not just to save the environment. This is what we talk about, man. This is the cost savings. The disruption of cost. Unfortunately, you have to outlay a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm assuming their accountants, though, can look at those figures and that, headline figure of $66 million can hopefully help them stomach that higher upfront cost.
Maybe the federal government, instead of giving fat rebates for buses, they could finance them, low interest loans. That would go a long way. Over long periods. They have the capability of doing that. I haven't heard people talk about that, but that seems like an idea. I should be an expert on this. So
you should have a podcast.
Wait a minute, I do. So additional to that, Tesla has deployed a 37 megapack project in Alaska to replace gas turbines.
Yeah, so this follows up what you were exactly saying. We are colder than Alaska. So Tesla's put together this very large battery storage project in Alaska. It's on the Kenai Peninsula, and there's a nice little video about it. It's quite large, 111 megawatt hours of storage, and this is to replace natural gas turbines, which they would normally use. And this is for temperatures down to only excuse me, only minus 30 Fahrenheit or minus 34 Celsius, which, we get colder than that here.
But not often. And there's many years that we haven't. And when we do, it's for shorter periods of time. It's, 3 or 4 days a year. It depends. We have an El Nino year, so things are not great for us. It's been a rough winter.
All right. So from Electrek, Norwegian energy giant Equinor and BP have announced that they're going to transform the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal into a major offshore wind operation and staging hub. So we've talked recently on the podcast that offshore wind is coming in a big way to the United States. So Equinor and BP, they're going to spend $250 million for infrastructure upgrades to this marine terminal. And this is going to be, the staging grounds for all of this future offshore wind energy in New York. So it's going to support more than 1,000 jobs annually in the region, they say.
That's great news. And there's a lot of people involved in setting up sort of the infrastructure for that. And I hope they go to town, because the United States is way behind on offshore wind. And it sounds like there's some great opportunities. We talked last week about floating wind going in the U.S. Northwest. So hopefully there's a lot of people to power, Brian, a lot of people to power. They even import some hydro from Quebec up north in Canada, which is great because it's clean, but there's other ways to get clean energy, and one of them is certainly that, and it'll build the industry and bring jobs to the United States, which is important. Okay, I've got a quick story here. Earthos has a method of building solar plants that does entirely away with trackers, racking, and structural steel. Instead, it installs the photovoltaic solar modules directly on the ground. I've seen a picture of this. They just put them on the ground.
They just sit there?
They just sit there evenly on the ground, attached to each other so they don't blow away. I would imagine they'd get a lot dirtier on the ground, but that's what they do. So it takes 20% off the price of a solar farm when you do that. So it's a radical innovation that's interesting. It challenges a basic architectural tenet of utility-scale solar, and that is that the $3 billion business of trackers and racking, which is what we have here in Canada with our solar farms. It seems important because our sun goes to a very different level in the sky in the wintertime. It's very low. Maybe at closer to southern United States and equatorial places that this might work better just going straight up, but they say that instead of the trackers, they just add more panels because it doesn't cost anything. Just throw in more panels. Again, price affects scopes of projects.
So they're not like propped up against each other or anything. They're just laying flat.
They're not propped up on anything, Brian. They're laying on the ground like a hippie smoking a cigar on a beach. I mean, it's just it's just laying there.
Well, as we've talked about before, my solar panels on my roof, I have a very low slope roof, very low angle. So, my solar panels already are almost pointing directly straight up. So, my summer production is amazing, and winter production not so much, especially this year with 18 feet of snow piled on top of them.
Yes, and spring is coming late because the groundhog did not see a shadow, or did see, I don't know, something like that.
Groundhog.
So they say there's a tremendous amount of unnecessary materials and, interestingly, risks. I don't know what the risks are. Maybe they fly off the panel or the panels can break. Or I don't know. But they claim it can build a solar plant in half the time on 1/3 of the land. I've often asked you, why are solar farms so spread out? You look and it seems like you could put double the solar panels in there, but they spread them out. And that's not talking about agrivoltaics where you're trying to do agriculture underneath. They just spread them out for some reason. I never understood why. It seems like a waste of land. Well, these are all put together, and then they got robots going over them, cleaning them. And it's all one big smooth surface. I guess they flatten the land, but so they can put it up in half the time on 1/3 of the land. And 70% use of cabling and trenching. So we'll see if that takes off.
Yeah, well, it's going to take all kinds of solutions. So there was a big announcement this week from Sony and Honda. They've signed a memorandum of understanding to make electric vehicles. So they Hope to have the first one out in 2025. Honda would design and manufacture the car, with Sony providing more of the digital mobility service and camera kind of technology, because that's their expertise. So that does make sense to me, Sony and Honda partnering on a car. But, it falls under this category of things we often talk about, of things happening in the distant future. And at this point, it's just an announcement. So let's hope they follow through.
Brian, let's get to the Clean Energy Show mailbag. Okay, I've got a message here from Jeff Ferensholtz, who is in Columbus, Ohio. He says, you remember last week we were talking about the small nuclear reactor at the U of S, the city with the buses, actually.
Yeah. And
you were saying that it was 20 kilowatts. Well, and we were making fun of it because, we're dumb. But he says there's a reason that it exists and it's only 20 kilowatts. Of course, there are a lot of different uses you can get out of these tiny nuclear reactors. First of all, they are used to teach students how to run nuclear reactors. Makes total sense. It's at a university.
Can't
it's
they
small.
Just watch The Simpsons for that?
It's been there since 1981 or something, so it's been there for a long, long time. First of all, they are used to teach students how to run nuclear reactors. The local reactor near me at The Ohio State University offers the reactor for use of scientists who need to expose samples to high-energy particles for imaging purposes and irradiating samples. I also know that small nuclear reactors are used for producing radioactive elements for medical purposes, such as radiation therapy. For the small nuclear reactors, the kilowatt rating is just how much heat is produced, which is just radiated away and not used for power. So thank you for clarifying that for us.
Yeah.
Of course we were stupid on that. Of course we were just children making fun of something without thinking about it. Of course there's a reason. I always teach my children, when something seems silly and it's done, it's usually there's a reason that you're not thinking of, and you should give it a second look, and I didn't follow my rule. We'd like to hear from you at the Clean Energy Show. Email us, please, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We're on Twitter or TikTok with the handle Clean Energy Pod, all one word. I got a YouTube channel for you to check out with special features and a voicemail option at speakpipe.com/Clean Energy Show. Brian, I say it every week, but God, we've gone long. I blame you and your relatives.
A lot of blame to go around.
More than 90% of heaters sold in frigid Finland, Norway, and Sweden are heat pumps. How about that? How about them apples?
Yeah, so we own a rental property, a rental house that we rent out, and it's got a gas boiler, and it's on its last legs, and I'm really hoping that we can replace it with some type of a heating and cooling heat pump, because the house doesn't have air conditioning either. So stay tuned. I'm going to look into that.
Kill two birds with one stone. And we haven't heard much about your rammed earth cottage lately. Is that still a thing?
Still working on it, but, it'll be a long, long process.
Well, we look forward to the next update. GM electric vehicles are going to power homes in California in a new pilot program. So the GM is working towards vehicle to load and vehicle to grid.
Oh, okay. It's not just going to be heat generated from the Chevy Bolts that are on fire?
This show has really gotten dark. I blame myself for that. In Canada, where there's a carbon tax, 72% of the increase in gas prices since March 2 years ago has been caused by soaring prices for crude oil. Well, 13% of it has been from the carbon tax. So people say, it's a carbon... Well, politicians who know better say that. And they try to manipulate their base.
Yeah, and you can unfortunately see where people would think it's all the fault of the carbon tax, but no. What are you going to do?
It's supply and demand, people. Get your grade 6 education. Nearly 70% of the American public favors taking steps towards the goal of being carbon neutral by 2050, yet less than a third support transitioning off fossil fuels. You know what that means? That means they don't know what carbon neutral is. They don't know what anything is. The American public's not educated yet.
And the public in general, people don't pay attention to this stuff as much as we do, sadly.
That's why you people at home should listen and share this podcast with your friends and maybe even your family members, maybe even your uncles.
And I've got a lightning round story about solar panels over the canals in California. They're doing a pilot project. There's a lot of canals in California to get water from the north down to the south where there's no water. And they're working on covering these canals, which are currently open, with solar panels. And this has been done before, but this is going to be a pretty decent impact on the evaporation of the water. 1% to 2% of the water gets evaporated. But if you cover that with solar panels, you generate power and save your water.
By the way, turning down your heat 1 degree Celsius saves 4 to 6% of your gas in Europe. That's 1 degree, 4 to 6%. Now, if your gas costs a lot, that 4 per 6 might buy some extra groceries. So they're, gas prices are rising their fastest pace they have in ever. It's the fastest pace of a rise ever, and we've had Gulf wars many times over, it seems, in our lifetime, and that hasn't done it. It's the Russia people that were really gets it. So we should not be energy dependent on Russia. That is our time for this week, Brian. We don't have time for more lightning round. We've got to get going, so we'll see you next week. It's been incredibly intense preparing for this show. I feel like a nightly news anchor going before the nation and just, getting things at the last second and compiling information and then going on the air. It's just crazy.
It's been enlightening. I've learned a lot about the Whittinghams this week.
Shut up. We'll see you next week, maybe.
See you next week.